Welcome to the final video in the HMIS Introductory Series. This training will cover the bulk of data entry into HMIS. Before reaching this step in the workflow, you should have trained and learned about creating and finding your client in HMIS. Additionally, for some individuals, you should have also learned about creating a household, and for balance of state users, you should have trained on entering a release of information into HMIS. If you've not covered these items before reaching this point, you may want to go back and review the appropriate videos. Once those steps have been completed, you are ready to enter your client or household into your project and continue your training. To begin, we will navigate to the Entry Exit tab. So first, we'll have to find our client in HMIS. So I'll jump to the Client Profile tab, and you may search for your client by entering their information up top. But I happen to know my client's ID number, so I'm simply going to enter their ID number and click Submit to jump to their client profile. I'm also going to give myself some more space by minimizing the left pane here and simply clicking the little black arrow there. So the client profile is where we'll see an overview of your client's information. Now, a good rule of thumb in HMIS is to work from left to right when working in the tabs in HMIS. So we're on client profile currently. We'll then want to hop one right to households. And this is just to check that we've actually made our household if our client needs to have a household created. Next, we'll jump to ROI. And this is where we'll enter our release of information electronically into HMIS. Please remember, this is only required for balance of state users. But if this release of information is not in place, your client data will not be shared by any other project in your continuum. Finally, we'll reach the Entry Exit tab. Perfect. Now, if your client has been entered in any previous projects, you'll see them listed here. To enter your own client or household into a project, simply click the Add Entry Exit button and a pop-up will appear. The top section shows all your household members. To include any additional household members, you'll want to select them, and this will indicate that every member selected will be included in the project. You also see three more fields, which are Provider, Type, and Entry Date. Provider and Entry Date will auto-populate, and they'll be based off your Enter Data As mode and Backdate mode, if you're in either one of those modes. Please note, if your provider or entry date is incorrect, that also means your EDA or backdate mode are incorrect. In order to correct this, you'll have to back out of the screen, enter your Enter Data As mode, enter your backdate mode, and restart your entry exit. For the purposes of this training, these are the dates and the provider that I want. Under the type, you'll select HUD. Now, some additional other programs will select Path, RI, and VA, but there will be additional trainings covering these projects at a later point. Just so you're aware, this selection simply indicates the funding source of the project. But once those three fields are completed and correct, you'll click Save and Continue. This will take you to the main Entry Exit Data tab, which is where you enter the bulk of your client's data. The top section here will show the household members included in the project, and the Assessments area will include the assessments that we'll complete for the clients. Now, your assessments may look slightly different than this. If you have any difference, you may want to refer to your agency about their particular workflow. But in general, you'll want to work left to right, starting with your universal data elements. Then we'll cover our program data elements, and finally, you'll do our agency-specific assessments. Universal data elements are elements that HUD requires of every project that uses HMIS, regardless of funding source. Program data elements are common to most projects, but not all. And agency-specific elements are elements that your agency and your agency alone wishes to collect on their clients. So let's scroll down and let's look at all the questions involved under the Universal Data Element Assessment. Please remember, these fields are required by all projects. So we'll go through these questions one by one and see what each one means. The first question we have is relationship to head of household. Let me just center this screen a little bit more. That's better. So as I was saying, The first question is relationship to head of household. This field indicates the relationship to the head of household the client has. Please note, the actual head of household will always be listed as self. The date of birth field is where you record a client's date of birth. If your client does not know the actual date of their birth, but they know their age, you may approximate the date of birth. You would enter the year of their birth and use 0101 as the default for the day and month. Just below is the date of birth type field. From the drop-down menu, simply select how complete the date of birth is. Mostly, is it a full date of birth or an approximate or partial date of birth? Next is primary race. If you hover over the primary race text, you will see the 5 race options that HUD provides. After each, there will be a listing of the countries of origin, which indicates one of the 5 races. For example, if my client stated they were Malaysian, I will look for Malaysia and see that it is listed after Asian. I would then select Asian for primary race. If your client does not know or will not choose one of the 5 races or any country of origin indicated in the pop-up, do not make any assumptions. Select client doesn't know or client refused as appropriate. Next, you will see secondary race. This is to enter a second race for a client identifying as multi-ethnic. You should not repeat the field under primary race for any reason whatsoever. The ethnicity field is used to indicate whether or not a client identifies as Hispanic or Latino. Please note that Hispanic or Latino is considered an ethnicity and not a race in HMIS. If a client identifies the race as Hispanic or Latino, you may have to ask follow-up questions to gather their race information. Next, we see gender. Please select one of the drop-down options. Please note that HUD requires every option in the drop-down to be presented to a client. Do not make it an entry based on the context of a conversation or appearance. Furthermore, this field is self-reported. Appearance and legal documentation do not matter here. All that matters is how the client self-identifies. In short, you will not override a client's assertion for any reason. Next, you'll see the field, does the client have a disabling condition? If you hover over this field, you will see a pop-up providing more information on what is considered a disabling condition. Please remember, for initial entry, this field is self-reported. Just below this, you'll see, if covered by access, enter ID number. Here, you'll simply enter the client's access ID number if they have one. To follow are a series of questions related to homelessness. These questions are intended to help determine if a client is chronically homeless. Depending on your project and your selections for some questions, your screen may appear differently and you may be presented with additional clarifying questions. For the purposes of this training, we will cover every question you may see. The first question all projects will see is homelessness primary reason. Here you will select the option which is most in line with why your client has most recently become homeless. Next is residence prior to project entry. In other words, where was the client staying just prior to entering your project? Please pick the closest approximate answer. As a follow-up, you'll also see approximate date, you'll see length of stay in previous place. You'll simply select the best answer from the drop-down. Previous place is referring to your selection in the residence prior to project entry field. You may not see some of the fields we discuss next, depending on your project type and previous answers. Although we will cover every possible question you may see in this training, just be aware you may not see all of them every single time. First, we have approximate date homelessness started. This field should record the date that a client most recently became homeless. Any past history of homelessness beyond the client's most recent experience should not be considered here. For example, if the client became homeless on January 1st of this year, you would enter 0101 of the current year. Prior to this, in our scenario, the client was living in a home. Any homelessness that occurred before the client was living at a home is not tracked here. Below this question is a question asking the number of times the client has been homeless in the past 3 years. In other words, this is asking you to count how many instances of homelessness the client has experienced in the past 3 years. We will review a few scenarios to give a more clear understanding of this concept. Let's consider a client who became homeless on January 1st, on January 1st, but prior to that, they were in an apartment. If the client met you in August and they had never been homeless before, that would count as one instance of homelessness. Consider instead that the same client became homeless on January 1st, but in March and April, they stayed at a friend's place. Unfortunately, as of May 1st, they once again became homeless. In this scenario, they remained homeless until they met with you in August. This would count as 2 instances of homelessness, once from January until March, and then from May until August. In that case, we would select 2 in this field. Next, you'll see a question asking the total number of months the client has been homeless in the past 3 years. More specifically, this is where you would count up the actual number of months the client was homeless in the past 3 years. You do not need to tally up every single day the client was homeless. As a general rule of thumb, you may count a single day of homelessness in a month as a complete month. It is very important to accurately collect a client's homeless situation and history as it can affect eligibility to programs. There will be an additional training surrounding this topic, which you may opt to take after the conclusion of this video. It will cover chronic homelessness and the various caveats in greater detail. For this training specifically though, that concludes the questions on chronic homelessness. Still, there are 3 additional questions on the Universal Data Element Assessment. First, we see zip code of last permanent address. Simply enter the zip code of the last place the client was staying for at least 90 days. If the client remembers the city but not the zip code, you can use a set of default zip codes by hovering over the question. So for example, my client says they were staying in Avondale, but they don't remember the zip code. In this case, I would default to the Avondale zip code listed as 85323. Next is client location. There will only be one option for each database. Please select it. For your information, this is simply the geographic region that HUD has defined for your particular HMIS. The final question on the Universal Data Element Assessment is housing move-in date. Please note that not all projects may see this field. This field is only required for permanent housing, including rapid rehousing projects. If there is already data in this field, you will not keep it here. You will zero the field out. If your client is moving into housing the same day, you will update this field to reflect the move-in date. On the other hand, if your client has not moved into housing yet, you will clear this field so it is blank. You would then update this when the client actually moves into a housing situation. You have now completed the Maricopa UD assessment. On the bottom right corner, we're going to click Save, and we won't click Save and Exit. For a housing move-in date in our scenario, before we continue, we're going to say our client has not moved into any housing yet. So let's click Save. Okay. And we'll scroll back up, and before continuing with the assessments, we're going to see if we have any household members. And in my situation, I do have a couple of household members. So we'll want to fill out the Universal Data Element Assessment for them as well. First, we'll simply click on our next member. And you can see when a household member has been completed when they have a green check mark. On the Universal Data Element Assessment, you'll see a yellow check mark. That means some of the household members have completed their assessment, but not all. For the purposes of this training, the elements for the other 2 members have been completed already. So I'll simply scroll to the bottom. And as a quick note, it looks like our housing move-in date is actually completed here. Well, this is a good example of what we should do. When they're first entering your project, what you'll always do first is clear the date out so it reads as blank. Now, if my client was moving into housing today, I would put today's date. Otherwise, I will continue to leave this field blank and I will update it when my client does move into housing. So I'll click Save. You'll notice that the check mark has turned green and the check mark on the assessment is still yellow, and so I'll complete it for the last member as well. Just like before, this is pre-filled out, but once again, the housing movement date is populated. So, if you recall, we never leave this field with the previous date on initial project entry. What we'll do is we'll clear it out so it's blank, and we'll ask ourselves, is the client moving into housing today? If the answer is yes, you'll put in today's date. If not, we'll leave it blank and update it when the client does move into housing. So I'll click Save, and you'll see all my clients have been completed and the Universal Data Element Assessment has also been completed. Now, after completing the Universal Data Element Assessment for all household members, we'll just want to go back to the Head of Households profile, and then we'll jump to the Program Data Elements. Now, the Program Data Elements are common to most projects, but not necessarily all. If you do not see some of the elements in your project, this is not a cause for alarm. It simply means that your program doesn't track the field. We'll now discuss each element in this section. First, we'll see information about income. The top field is total monthly income. Simply enter the amount of income your client is making each month. Now please note, monthly income is meant to record monthly predictable income. Don't include one-time benefits such as inheritances, insurance settlements, or proceeds from the sale of property. These are not recorded in HMIS. Income from any source, simply select yes or no if the client is receiving income. And now we have the monthly income sub-assessment. This sub-assessment will allow you to specify the sources of income your client's income came from. On the right side, you'll see the HUD verification button and a red triangle. The red triangle means the sub-assessment has not been completed. To complete it, simply click on the HUD verification button. Here you'll see a list of income sources that HUD recognizes. So a quick way to select all these to know initially is to click the No Radio button at the very top. And then simply you'll select whatever income the client's actually making. So in my example, I'll select Earned Income and I'll see a pop-up appear. The only thing I'll do on this field is enter the monthly amount that the client is making. Please note that the start date should reflect the date that you're entering the data into HMIS, not the date that they originally began receiving income. So this date will automatically populate and will be correct. Click Save, and once you're done entering all the relevant incomes, we'll click Save and Exit. And you'll see that next to the HUD verification, the red triangle has turned into a green check mark. We have 3 more sub-assessments which will all work in the exact same way. So first, non-cash benefit from any source. This drop-down simply indicates yes, they are receiving something, or no, they are not. Just like before, we'll click on the HUD verification button, and we'll see the list of non-cash benefit sources that HUD recognizes. Please note that if you do select yes for one of these options, there will be no additional pop-up to complete. Furthermore, non-cash benefits, just like income, are meant to record recurring monthly predictable expenses. One-time prizes, winnings, gift cards, and so forth are not to be recorded in HMIS. Once the sub-assessment has been completed, simply click Save and Exit. Alright, we'll scroll down a little bit more, and we'll find ourselves at the health insurance section. So we'll answer the question, covered by health insurance. It's either yes or no. Once again, we'll click on the HUD verification link, and we'll see the list of health insurances that HUD wants to track. Please note that in Arizona, access is considered Medicaid. So we'll quickly select everything to no, and then we'll select yes for the appropriate insurance that the client is receiving. Please note, you can definitely select more than one insurance type if the client has more than one insurance. So let's click Save and Exit. and you'll see the HUD verification turn green once again. Finally, we have the disabilities sub-assessment. So if you recall, under the first assessment we did for the universal data elements, there was a question asking about the client's disabling condition, yes or no. This should reflect a yes or no as well. So to specify, we'll start by clicking the HUD verification. And these are the 7 disabling conditions that HUD recognizes. So if your client said they have a disabling condition on the first assessment, then they should select at least one of these as well. So let's go ahead and select one, and you'll come up with a pop-up. So please note that this question and this question are the same. You will duplicate the answer for both. In other words, if one is yes, both are yes. If one is no, both are no. I would recommend just asking the top question here, as this is the important question and the best wording to ask. Start date will be the day you're entering the data into HMIS, not the start date of their actual disability. Once again, start date will always be the day you're entering the information and nothing more. So once this field is complete, you'll click Save, and we'll make sure everything's filled out, and we'll click Save and Exit. One final time, we'll see the HUD verification red triangle turn into a green check mark. Once you've completed all 4 sub-assessments, we'll scroll down, and there's just a couple more questions we have to answer. The first is highest level of education attained. Just select the most appropriate answer from the drop-down. And next is if the victim is a domestic violence victim or survivor. Once again, select the most appropriate answer from the drop-down. If the answer is yes, you will fill out the 2 additional sub-dependent questions. If the answer is no, you'll leave those questions blank. Once you're complete, you'll click Save and scroll back up to the top of the screen. Here, you'll see if you have additional household members to complete the assessment for. So in my case, I still have 2 household members that have gray check marks that have to be completed. Furthermore, the Program Data Elements assessment has a yellow check mark, indicating that I'm not yet complete for the whole household. So let me go and complete these for the other members as well. So, like before, I'll fill out the top 2 fields. I'll complete the sub-assessments. And then we just want to make sure that we fill out every single option here. So let me see what happens when we don't fill out every single option. So if I, for example, selected yes here, but did not fill out the rest of these, I'll try to click Save and Exit, and I'll get an error. Essentially, this means that you cannot leave your options selected as incomplete. You must fill out an option in one of these 5 fields. So let me go and correct that. Save, and then we'll go back to our final household member as well. And we'll fill out this section also. Now, there will actually be an additional video covering interim updates. So there'll be a video covering the sub-assessments in more detail, as well as how to make updates to any of the benefits. So we have the 3rd assessment here. Alright, and looks like we're now complete. We'll scroll back up and take a look. So all 3 of our members have green check marks. The program data elements have a green check mark. We're good to go. Now, the final assessment you would do would be the agency-specific assessment, and you may have additional assessments after that. For the purpose of this training, we will not cover assessments that are specific to an agency. Please refer to your agency guidelines on how to complete those assessments. For programs such as PATH, RIE, SSVF, and HOPA programs, there will be additional training videos which will cover the elements under those programs. So once they're complete, we'll click Save and Exit all the way at the bottom. And now we'll see that we have a new project indicating when our clients enter the program, and this will be our project entry. All the way on the right hand side, you'll also see the client count column, which will indicate exactly how many clients you have in the project. Now, this covers the initial data entry for a client entering your project. Of course, for many projects, it's essential to record any changes or updates for your client. So we'll cover how to do an interim update at this point. So in order to add an interim review, you'll go to the interims column, as highlighted on the screen currently, and we'll click on the note right below it. A pop-up will appear. This will list any previous interim reviews that you've done for the client, and we haven't done any for our client at this time. And we'll simply click Add Interim Review. We'll just make sure that all of the client members in the household are included. And much the same, the entry exit provider, the entry exit type, and the review date will auto-populate. For the interim review type, you'll select Update or Annual Assessment. Now, an annual assessment is to be completed within a 60-day window, that is 30 days before or 30 days after a client's anniversary into a project. Please note that the head of household's anniversary date will apply to all members of the household. So even if a new household member has only been in the project for 2 months, if the anniversary date for the head of household is coming up, that same anniversary date will apply to all members of the household. Okay, so we'll select Update here, and I'll click Save and Continue. Now I'm back to a very similar screen. In this case, once again, I'm at Program Data Elements. You will update these common program elements during the interim updates. Let's start at the top with the income-related questions. So previously, my client reported that they were receiving $250 a month in income. I now want to indicate that they're currently making $350.